They say that you should never forget your history of your family. You need to retell the stories over and over to your children and their children. This is the story about my DeMark family history. I am a descendant of the first Dutch colony to settle in New York in the 1600s. Peter DeMark came to America in 1649. It seems that all the DeMarks were very successful people. Even my great-grandfather, Frederick Willis DeMark, was a wealthy man. He lived in Stillwater, Oklahoma, in a big two-story home with servants. My mother recalls as a child playing in her grandfather's home. Even though it was the Depression, he was still very wealthy. It was said that he received his land from the Oklahoma land rush of 1889. And it was also said that he gave land to Oklahoma State University to build upon. My grandfather, Robert Martin DeMark, was born in 1912 in Stillwater, Oklahoma. He was raised by his grandparents in Vancouver, British Columbia, because his mother, Amelia Hart DeMark, had died of appendicitis when he was just a baby. My grandfather met my grandmother Hardesty in Los Angeles, California. He was a tall man, about 6'3". He swept my grandmother off her feet because he could sing, play the guitar, along with playing the harmonica strapped around his neck. He was the tallest person around the short Hardesty family. The average height for a Hardesty man was about 5'6". My mother, Judith Ann DeMark, was born in 1934, and her sister, Janet Marie DeMark, was born in 1936. My grandfather would serve in the Army during World War II, along with my Uncle Ray, who was in the Navy. Above all the stories that my grandfather told me, his two aunts were by far the most memorable. As a child, my grandpa would tell me the story of his aunt's journey to Russia and how they witnessed the last Russian coronation of 1896. Kate Koon Bovey and Louise Koon Velie were their names. They were two incredibly fortunate women that were raised in a very affluent upbringing in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Kate, at the age of 21, and Louise, 19, were invited to the Russian coronation of the Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra Ferdinova of the last Russian monarchy. They were escorted by the late General John Logan's widow. John Logan, a Union general during the Civil War, was responsible for establishing Memorial Day in the United States. Kate, a student and journalist, recalls in her book, The Russian Coronation of 1896, Letters from Kate Koon Bovey, the extravagant procession of the coronation and the 2 weeks of festivities she witnessed along with her sister Louise. Even the menu for the coronation dinner was an elaborate parchment scroll tied with silk cord. Kate and her sister Louise were adorned in fabulous gowns for the event. The train of their dresses were 4 yards long, and she said it was difficult to curtsy. Mrs. John Logan's dress was just as spectacular as the gowns worn by the royal court. As Kate elaborates in her book, the emeralds, sapphires, and diamonds that the guests and the royal court wore during the coronation were so overwhelming it made her dizzy. Kate and Louise actually saw the Orloff diamond being worn by one of the women in the royal court. She described it as being the size of a dove's egg. She was so enthralled with the events and sights in Moscow, but the Kremlin was the most breathtaking. The walls were adorned with gold, and the chandeliers were the most magnificent she had ever seen. After their experience of a lifetime, Kate and Louise Koon, along with Mrs. John Logan, sailed back to the United States. Kate married Charles Cranston Bovey, a successful businessman who would create the Washburn Crosby Company, which was the largest U.S. flour producer in the United States in the 20s. It later became known as General Mills. They would reside in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Louise married Charles Deere Velie, the grandson of John Deere of the John Deere tractor empire. In 1918, unfortunately, the Tsar and Tsarina and the Romanov children were killed by the Bolsheviks. In 1942, Kate would later write and publish her book about her and her sister's adventures in Russia. Here today is where they rest, the entire family of the Koons, Boveys, Velies. The Van DeMarks. This is my story.